the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show. I am Jason Wally Waldron, and I'm joined here today by with Joe C2. And Joe, over the break, we were talking about something really cool. So we're going to dive right back into this. We were talking about some of the myths and misconceptions about how business owners really think about wealth and think about just think about these things. And you shared something interesting with me, and so I don't want to steal your thunder. But as we begin with the end in mind, right? That's something that we always, right? You teach your clients that, I teach my clients that. Really, the entire exit planning community hopes to educate business owners on the thought process there. But share with me a little bit about what you were sharing with me on break there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was sharing was this notion that when we're defining wealth, it's funny when I meet clients, a lot of times what they want to talk about initially with wealth management is the investments. And I always tell them the investments is the execution to a greater goal, right? To a bigger vision. And so getting back to that dreaming aspect we were talking about.
Yeah.
For us, it's really when we're creating I call it a financial roadmap. It's what are the mile markers that specific tangible things that a client wants to see in their life that lets them know that they are experiencing the sort of success and living their best life that is specific to them, right? Wow. It's not so much about having more. It's not so much about did they beat the S&P 500 last year.
Yep.
It's those things that are tied to what they want to manifest in their life, but that also connect to who they are from a values perspective internally.
Yeah.
That is, in my mind, the definition of wealth. And I'll give you a very specific example.
Cool.
You know, for my wife and I, travel is really critical. Education for our daughters is really critical, partially because my wife put herself through college. I put myself through college.
Yeah.
And so like, it's those kind of discussions and it's that kind of planning, I think, ahead of the exit that if owners take the time to do, they're going to have a much greater sense of fulfillment when they actually transact. I actually have a business coach myself, and I've actually brought her into part of my coaching practice related to exit planning. Mm-hmm. And she has a saying that is really, when you very much boil it down as humans, when we're either working towards something, right, or we're moving away from something.
Totally. Yep.
And I really believe that that's a fundamental element when we look at how business owners think, right? So oftentimes they're like, their motivation maybe stems from burnout, from the fact that business may not be doing well. So let's just put that owner on one side of the screen.
Yep.
Versus those who are literally looking at the business beyond their own identity to where can it catapult me to next?
Yeah.
I would argue that the second owner in that example is going to have a much greater degree of success in their ability to unlock their profits.
What you were just landing there, Joe, you were dropping so much knowledge, and you were landing it about how you can unlock your profits and unlock your potential. But let me just bring us back into what you were sharing, because that was awesome. First you were talking about just getting clear, really, in terms of beginning with the end in mind, and just like what are those mile markers that show your success, and I think that value alignment is so big, and you were talking about how you also employ coaching, and I think that's a big thing. We have a coach who shared with us the idea of these business owners, right? You have to define for you, the business owner, what is your game, and then how do you know that you're winning your game, right? And that's exactly what you're saying in a totally different way. And then finally, what I loved about what you were sharing there was the idea of tapping into really the emergent creative, right? The expansive nature of humanity, and not just running away from things, right? And maybe we can dive into that a little bit, because I know that you and I, because we do so much in the exit planning world, you see that classic 52-year-old who's just burnt out and is like, my, like, can I just sell this stupid thing and get this burden off of me?
Sure.
And that's like, you have to come out of the foxhole or the corner you painted yourself into and actually get back into that creative space if you're going to make the most of that event. So I'd be curious to hear some of your experiences. What do you do when you find kind of your typical burnout, tired business owner?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? Because now part of it is um, you're dealing typically with like a little bit of triage,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So you've got to, in many ways, try and address the immediate concerns for them so they have a little bit of space to breathe.
Yeah.
It's very challenging, I think, and I think first and foremost, it's like you got to acknowledge them and meet them where they are, right?
Totally.
So it's challenging to get them into a creative mindset if they're in a reactive mode.
Yep. Yep.
And in many ways, from a business perspective, I would defer to like someone like you or some of the business coaches that we work with, if that's the main sort of crux of stress.
Right.
Oftentimes it is because like their income is tied to the business, and that's a self-feeding prophecy into their personal life.
Totally.
I I have somebody I'm working with. Well, they're not formally a client, but we've been in discussions for a while, and I've been urging them to try and do some baseline financial planning because they're contemplating an exit right now.
Yep.
He jokingly shot back a message, something to the effect like, "I might need a referral to a bankruptcy attorney here before too long." And it kind of goes back to your point. But assuming you can do some basic triage, then I think it comes down to, okay, getting honest with them. What other team of advisors and resources do we need to pull in here, right? What's
Right.
the budget for it? And then trying to, on the one hand, evaluate your business options, which again, I think that's really where your domain of expertise is. But then on a
Yep.
personal side, giving them a realistic view of, okay, if you are able to um, capitalize on selling this business for X,
Right.
what is the impact on you? Okay. And are you in a position where does that mean you have to have some sort of earnout structure? You have
Right.
to have an employment agreement with the acquirer so that you can actually have enough income to sustain your
Right.
lifestyle for the foreseeable future? Or have you saved enough over the years that you can now move on to something else that speaks to who you are and
Right.
where you're at in life?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and I want to kind of call that out because there's a very important interplay that happens when you have the different advisors around the table, right? And you and I both, as trained certified exit planning advisors, we have an advantage that we can bring to our clients that maybe other folks might not because we're already speaking that same language. And
Mm-hmm.
right, and we're moving people through that value acceleration process and doing so in a very transparent way. And I know that you've had this experience. I've had this experience. Sometimes, as you go through that process, you're really holding up a mirror. In our case, we're holding up a mirror and essentially saying, "Look, here's what the outside capital markets are going to value your business at in a best case,
Mm-hmm.
right?" And and I'm going to share this with our listeners. In most case scenarios, you're not going to like that number the first time we do that exercise. Just be ready,
Sure.
right? Be ready to take that stake in the ground and kind of be a little disappointed.
Yeah.
And then, but the importance of that is then working with someone like yourself, right? Because you can sit there and extract, well, what does that mean for me then, right? So if I thought my business was worth $10 million and I was going to sell it and then take the tax hit and then have $7 million in my wealth account and then ride off into the sunset, and I find out that that's not a possibility for me today like I thought it was, that's still okay, right? Because now you are actually knowing what you're dealing with.
I agree. Well, and I agree with you, right? Knowledge is power, right? One way or the
Totally.
other. So
Yep.
it's better to have at least a dose of reality and know what your real options are
Right.
than to continue to be sort of in denial. I mean, the other thing I'll mention on that is that sometimes it's a really different experience to go from a active investment that you're managing, this business that you own that's a private equity investment that's oftentimes generating a certain lifestyle of income, to
Right.
a passive portfolio where the returns, relatively speaking, on that capital are going to be lower than what you were experiencing inside the business. And
Ye-
so managing and calibrating expectations
Right.
is something that is obviously what we do all day long,
Yep.
but it's something that, again, I think owners need to be prepared for.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I think you and I had a conversation one time about how exit planning is sort of an interesting word because it's almost better to think, hey, look, let's have a journey with the end in mind, right? Yeah, like throw out the words exit planning and stuff like that. I'll give you an example on our side, and maybe you can build on this, but we think of exitology as build a business the right way, and the exit will take care of itself. And so, right, it's basically an accountability around building a healthy business, and so that the business owner has options. You shared with me that you think of this as a journey. How does that look on your side, on the personal
Yeah,
side?
I love the way you share that, because I think if you approach it in as much as you can early on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're taught that it's starting with the end in mind, the idea of building enterprise value from sort of day one early on as you can, versus the typical lifestyle business where I think the owner looks at it as an ATM machine,
Yep.
right? And all of a sudden, fast forward, they're 55, 60, they're burned out. And then they
Right.
realize, like, how do I pivot this to an enterprise value business? That's a much
Yep.
harder, steeper climb.
That
Um,
that absolutely is.
yeah. So I think to the extent that, and I loved what you said, and I would agree with you, while it won't necessarily just take care of itself, the exit, I think you're going to have tremendous more optionality
Yes.
with the business that has that building enterprise value.
So yeah, so with that, you said my favorite word in the whole world, which is optionality. That's what we create for people all day long. So thank you for saying that. Folks,
Sure.
you can always go to exitology.com, click contact us, send us a question, we'll answer it on an upcoming episode. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in 2 minutes here with Joe C2.